What's up, guys? Welcome to the first midweek edition of our Westworld Companion podcast. That's going to be the schedule moving forward, by the way. It's going to be the Sunday night instant reaction. I'll post that right away on Sunday night. Sometimes, if you're listening on YouTube, sometimes that'll be a little bit of a later upload because I have to turn it into a video, and David St. Martin actually uploads it. But if you are listening on YouTube, that might be like Monday, depending on when I get it done. But if you subscribe on iTunes or check it out on Stitcher, I think you can subscribe on Stitcher too, right? I feel like I should know that. But yeah, iTunes or Stitcher, it'll be out immediately. So if you are looking for that instant reaction, it'll be out. It'll be ready for your Monday morning commute, if that's when you listen to it. However you want to do it. But it's on iTunes, Stitcher, and YouTube eventually. So just keep that in mind. But it's the instant reaction Sunday nights. And then midweek, I don't know if it'll always be the same day. It'll be like a Wednesday, Thursday podcast. I think this one will probably come out on Wednesday. I'm gonna revisit the episode from the previous week. So in this case, it's season 2, episode 1, Journey into Night. That's the focus of this one, and then kind of a preview of the next episode or the episodes to come or whatever. But this is more of a dense breakdown. I've had some time to settle and organize my thoughts. I've heard some of the chit chat, some of the recaps from people. I've watched the episode 3 times now. I'll probably do it twice. I don't know if I'm always going to watch 3 times, but enough where I get the gist of it. And I'm pausing, I'm taking notes, I'm really focusing on all the details. So that's the context of this. But no spoilers. I'm not really doing a deep dive into the Reddit theories. Things kind of creep in here and there, on Twitter or whatever. But for the most part, these are really just original ideas. I want to maintain some of that originality. I also want to make sure I don't miss anything. I'm trying to give you guys a complete, fully contextualized. Is that a word? I don't know. Recap of the show that we're watching. I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to provide a resource for you. But also, I want the theories to be somewhat original. I don't want it to be, a copycat of other podcasts. So that's my approach moving forward. But let's just get to it. So some corrections from my instant reaction Sunday night. It is an instant reaction. I literally watch it, record right away. So there are some things I missed or got wrong or whatever. First of all, I was going to start with saying that in the instant reaction, if you didn't check it out, I basically start by speculating the very first scene with Arnold or Bernard talking to Dolores. I speculate just that. Is that Arnold? Is that Bernard? What timeline is this in? Is Dolores, the awake version of Dolores, or is she the original iteration where she's like, full robot mode, early Dolores? We don't know. And then I wrote, it's clear that it is an old conversation based on Dolores' outfit. It's clear that this is a flashback to the conversations that Arnold and Dolores used to have. But now I've actually flip-flopped back to being unsure again. I read that everywhere. Every recap, some people just didn't even question it. They're like, oh, that's flashback to Arnold and Dolores. And then other people I saw speculated. They're like, we don't really know, but it seems pretty clear that this is old. And it's like, I don't know if it is. I went back. I wrote it in here as my corrections. Like, yeah, it's old Dolores. My bad. I was skeptical about the wrong thing. But then I realized that I don't know if I was. Like, I'm not sure. We'll see. But the outfit that she's wearing, that old outfit, is also what she was wearing at the gala. I went back and checked it out. She's wearing that same dress. And then, when we see all the sort of uprising stuff, she's dressed differently. Or maybe she just took, like, the blue part of, like, the dress off or whatever. I don't know. I'm not a fashion expert, believe it or not. But she's wearing the same outfit that she's talking to Arnold or Bernard. That outfit she's wearing, that blue dress, is what she's wearing at the end of season 1. In the gala shooting scene. So it's not unheard of. The outfit's definitely not an indicator. We just don't know. And then the flip side of it, because he's talking about a dream he was having. And that's sort of a parallel to season 1 where Dolores is talking about how she's in a dream. If it's flip-flopped. So that could be some sort of game where almost like Dolores is playing into the fact that she's a robot and Arnold's the engineer, even though in reality, Bernard hasn't fully woken up yet. And she's like playing into it so she can kind of make him realize the full extent of what he is and what this world is and get him incorporated in the plans and all that. I don't know. So I'm gonna stick with that skepticism until I see more evidence one way or the other. But also this was a mistake. I was talking about how it was the next day. It's actually 2 weeks later. I just missed that. There's an indication by the security team that communications have been down for 2 weeks. They find video footage when they scalp the Ghost Nation guy. And that footage from 11 days, 9 hours ago, and that's Dolores already in the midst of the uprising. So that was my bad. It's 2 weeks has passed. It's not the next day. There's been 2 weeks between, the gala shooting and then the security team doing like a search and rescue mission. And finally, this isn't really a mistake or something I missed, but something that maybe I didn't focus enough attention on in that instant reaction. Bernard's account of things may not be trustworthy. I would keep an eye on that. So last year, Dolores was kind of the unreliable narrator, and she very well may still be. We'll get more into that later. But it seems as if Bernard is sort of experiencing system failures that could be messing with his ability to perfectly recall the events of the gala shooting and the events of the weeks afterwards. Like, in other words, it might be as simple as him blacking out chunks of time, which is very clearly depicted. Like, things are kind of coming back to him in waves. But it also could be that he's actually seeing things that aren't there or not seeing things that are there. It's probably just worth watching the Bernard scenes with a skeptical eye for the rest of the season because, or at least, that 2-week period, because it seems like there may be some trickery with what we're seeing as an audience and what's actually happening, because we're seeing through Bernard's eyes in those scenes. So I'd be skeptical of that. But moving on now to things that I sort of dove deeper into, things that I watched with a more careful eye the second time around or picked up on the second time around. These are not mistakes from the instant reaction, but things that I think are going to be important to keep in mind moving forward. First, Bernard gets knocked on the ground and starts to leak brain fluid or whatever. He ends up injecting himself with fluid from another host after the mesh network picks up that he is a nearby host. So when he's looking at that tablet, it's recognizing nearby host and his face comes up. That could be huge. Because right now, though, nobody knows. I mean, it's very clear, like, unless someone's like very coyly playing along, it seems clear to me that nobody knows except for Ford, who's now dead. Nobody knows that Bernard is in fact a robot, right? So people figuring that out, or in turn not figuring that out, could have a huge impact on, the plot, the plan for Dolores, the plan for Maeve, the plan for Delos and just the Westworld in general and everything. Huge implications depending on whether or not people know that Bernard is a robot. Like I said, it seems like no one knows, but it also seems like this mesh network could easily give him away. I don't know who has access to that's more the question. Who has access to this mesh network? Because if someone logs in and looks at the nearby host, then Bernard's face is going to pop up and the gig is sort of up. Now, some context, Charlotte doesn't know about the mesh network. Like he says, because he said he's going to use it to locate Peter Abernathy, and then she's like, what's the mesh network? And then he has to like explain what the mesh network is to her. You know what I mean? So she doesn't know about it, and she's pretty high ranking. So who does know about it? Does anyone know about it? Does Strand know about it? He's obviously I think he's the head of operations, right, of Delos. So he's obviously high up there too. Does he know about the Strand network or the mesh network, or was it just Ford and Bernard? Is there a reason why no one else knows? It's just very interesting to me. And then what about Maeve or Dolores or even like Lee? Like that's a huge plot points bank on who knows about this mesh network and if they're going to use it to figure out that Bernard is a host. Now this is a smaller one, but something I did it jumped out at me when I was rewatching this. When Maeve and Lee are making their way to the control room, they end up in the control room. You see all the dead bodies everywhere. There's a dead bear in the control room, and Lee sort of gives it a funny look. They show the bear, they focus on the bear, and then they cut to Lee, and he gives it a funny look. Now, the reason this jumped out the second time is because, I mean, you're watching the first time, and you're thinking, oh, maybe that's weird to see a bear in the control room. I get that. But beyond that, it could just be, how did a bear get out? Or it could be somehow connected to the dead tiger at the end. Obviously, that was a big thing, too. You have the guy from Delos being like, oh, we spotted our first anomaly, and it's a dead tiger, and we find out that the tiger is actually from a different park and somehow made its way into Westworld, so that was confusing. Now, I don't recall seeing bears in Season 1. I guess it's possible there'd be a bear in Westworld, like naturally, but also maybe the bear is from an even, a different park. So that's Lee noticing that some other animal broke out of the existing park and ended up in the Westworld control room. Assuming that is the Westworld control room, by the way, that could be the control room for all the parks. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that works. But I don't know if those are connected at all. And then it led to almost a bigger question of, did other worlds overthrow or sort of rebel at the same time as well? Because we're obviously focused on Westworld, and it seems like the search and rescue team is also focused on Westworld because they say, we have search and rescue teams in other parks right now looking for the park guest or making sure they're safe or whatever. But it seems like we're focusing on Westworld because that's where this incident seemed to have started, which makes sense because Ford was there. And from what I understand, Ford runs the whole thing, not just the Western division. I think he runs all the parks. I think it seems like he created the robot technology, unless people have expanded and he's only allocated to this one sort of section, the original Westworld. I don't know, but it seems like he runs everything. And then with that in mind, why would he just rebel with Dolores in Westworld, why wouldn't he do it at all the parks all at once if this is his master plan? So I don't know if seeing a dead bear in the control room even makes sense to attach all this other meaning to, but it is sort of an interesting, bigger thought moving forward with the season. Next up, some added context on the Peter Abernathy thing. So obviously he has all this, data, this park data or code or whatever uploaded into him, and they're sending him out to Delos. We see this when Charlotte's kind of communicating. She overrides the communication embargo with like this code word and is looking to basically get extracted, and they're like, oh, we're not going to extract you until we receive the package. And she's like, I sent the package. And they're like, well, we never got it, so we're not going to send a rescue team until you do. Now, weeks later, a rescue team is there, it would seem, right? I don't know how big it is, but you do have Delos. I think they allude to the fact that they've got search and rescue teams at the other parks as well. So what happened? Did they end up receiving that package? We don't know. This conversation where they said we haven't received the package happens the night of the gala, and then a couple weeks later, the search and rescue teams are there. So either they received the package and decided to come to start, extracting the board members that are still alive or the park guests or whatever. So maybe they received it, or maybe for some reason they decided not to follow through with that original thing. It was like an empty threat. They're like, all right, we're just kidding. We'll come get you anyway. Like, I don't know what happened, but obviously something changed from what they're telling her to 2 weeks later they actually have the search and rescue teams there. So that's just interesting to note as well, just a little anomaly, a little difference. Speaking of, and this is a little one as well, but I completely missed it until I heard the guys from Bald Move actually bring it up. By the way, their podcast is called Watching Westworld. It's a good one. I would definitely recommend checking it out in addition to this one, obviously, not instead. I'm not crazy. But actually, and just so you know, because I was talking about not killing myself with theories, they have a cutoff point in their podcast where they're like, if you don't want to hear like our sort of, really speculative theories, then shut it off now. I shut it off. So I listened to their recap before I did this, but I didn't want to cloud my thought with other people's theories. I want these to be original again. So just some context there. So just so you guys know what I'm working with when I'm coming up with these things. But yeah, they noticed that Rubus, I think is how you say his name, who you guys would probably better recognize as the bandit with mutton chops that always drinks milk. He's in the first episode of season 1, I believe. He pops up here and there. In this episode, he shoots a woman on the night of the gala, one of the gala guests, like a human. He shoots her in the head. She's balancing the glass on top of her head, so he shoots her, shoots a woman in the head. But then on the beach, when they're sort of offing all these hosts, they're executing them. He jumps in front of a chick and says something. I forget the exact quote, but it's like shoot a woman, not on my watch, or like some shit like that. And he's Mr. Moral High Ground won't shoot a woman, or doesn't want somebody else to shoot a woman, even though he just shot someone. I don't think these things are mistakes. It was so deliberately contradicting to just seeing that guy shoot a woman in the head that it shows something. Is it just supposed to tell us that these robots are off their loops and kind of malfunctioning and spasming between different characters or whatever? Or is it like, listen, something drastic changed from the night of the gala to 2 weeks later with these hosts, and they've evolved or changed in some very fundamental way where he's literally doing the exact opposite of what he was doing 2 weeks before? I don't know. But that is something that I didn't really pick up on the first time I was watching it, and then I heard the Bald Move guys talking about it, and I was like, oh yeah, there's no way that's an accident. So that's interesting to note. All right, I wanted to dive a little further into those flash cuts from the beginning of the episode. There's a bunch of them fast. It's the very beginning of the episode, and it looks like it's a whole bunch of flashbacks from season 1, but then if I pause in each one and sort of examined it a little further, and you get a little more context. So what I'm about to discuss was in episode 1. I'm not doing any sort of spoilers. What I will discuss at the end of the episode, and I'll give you a warning, you can shut it off if you want, the preview of the show for, like in the weeks ahead, and they show you previews from the upcoming season. Some people don't like to watch those. So if you want to shut it off before that point, I'll give you a warning, and you can do so. Because, it's something HBO offered. It's not like some script I stole. But at the same time, some people don't like to get those little clips because they give too much away or whatever. Whatever. It's 100% in your rights to watch that or not. But I'm not going to spout off a bunch of stuff from it in case you're the type of person that doesn't want to watch the In the Weeks Ahead section. So all I'm talking about right now is things that we saw within the episode in those flash cuts. So this is all fair game. Just giving you a warning. But yeah, so some of it was for sure flashbacks of things that we saw in season 1, you would think. I heard someone saying that all the flash cuts were things that happened in the 2-week period. I don't think that's true. I guess it's hard to tell. They're kind of vague images, but it seems clear to me that some of it's just, flashbacks. But then there's also clearly some things that are things we haven't seen before from season 2. For example, we've got Dolores in a modern day or, possibly futuristic black dress. Definitely not old-fashioned. We've never seen her dress like that. So it's obviously, it isn't part of the Westworld narrative. Bernard sort of following her, smiling, looks like they're jovial. It's very strange. So that would be hard to believe that that's just part of this rebellion uprising, because why would they be having so much fun unless one of them is, robot version, the other one's playing along, or they're both robots or whatever, but they're not dressed. It's just very interesting. We'll dive more into that, I guess, in the section where I talk about in the weeks ahead, but I won't go into that now, but it was interesting to see. You also see Bernard shooting one of those, futuristic machine guns that all the security team have. The one that Maeve uses to escape, and Hector has it as well in season 1. Those machine guns, we see Bernard shooting that, which is like some next level. We've never seen Bernard that aggressive, really, in any aspect of life. So that's interesting to note too. I'm not really sure. I assume that happens in the 2-week period that has been blacked out, part of the uprising. I guess we don't know that either, but that definitely jumped out. It seems like he was there for the massacre. That's the other thing, too. It cuts to him sitting in a chair in the control room as the security team is being murdered and, gunned down. So we see later in the episode, Maeve and Lee go into the control room and everyone's dead. It turns out, unless, like I said, he's an unreliable narrator, but it seems like if that really happened, then Arnold is sitting in a chair while this is happening, with his hands in his head looking conflicted. So that's very strange too. It wasn't even like he's part of it. At some point he's shooting a gun. At some point he can't believe what's going on around him. Now I don't know the order of those things. I don't know which one happens first. I don't know if he, progressively becomes more awake and more on Team Robot, or if he is all gung-ho about this rebellion, and then when he sees all the violence and chaos, in all its bloody glory or whatever, he starts to become overwhelmed, and he's like, oh shit, This sounds like something I don't want to get involved in, and he starts to get overwhelmed. Who knows? And then at what point does he crash and wake up on the beach? It's interesting to know. And by the way, speaking of that beach scene, he gets woken up by Stubbs, who's the head of security from season 1, and he's just fine. Remember he was taken by the Ghost Nation, so that's already an oddity, or open-ended thread, whatever you want to call it, but they went out of their way to remind us of that too, because, in the previously on Westworld section, before the episode started, they pulled out a clip of him getting tackled by the Ghost Nation. So that's basically, the writers being like, hey, remember this? Remember how he got taken? Well, he's fine now. And it's purposely setting up for a mystery. So they'll definitely explain that. I'm assuming they'll do it in some sort of flashback sequence. But I would also fully expect that to be soon. I don't think that's some big overarching mystery. I wouldn't be surprised if we find out, this coming Sunday. And speaking of this coming Sunday, there's already a handful of sort of big overarching questions that have been set up by episode 1. I have a feeling at least most of these might linger throughout the season, or honestly, maybe even the series. This might be a multi-season mystery. So starting with this first one, this seems like more of a small sort of condensed one, but what is the meaning of Arnold's dream? So the episode starts with Arnold's dream, and just to recap the conversation, he said, I dreamt I was on the ocean, and you and the others were on a distant shore. You had left me behind, and the waters were rising around me. And then Dolores sort of questions what it means, and he says, dreams don't mean anything, they're not real. And she said, what is real? And he says, that which is irreplaceable. So the fact that the whole season opens up with that is probably not a throwaway scene. I have a feeling it applies to something, I mentioned earlier in this episode, as well as on my instant reaction. We don't really know the context of who's having that conversation. We don't know if it's old Dolores, and this is a conversation with Arnold that, before she killed Arnold. We don't know that. We don't know if it's modern day Dolores, but still a robot, and Bernard. We don't know if it's Bernard not being aware of who he is, or if he is aware of who he is, or same thing with Dolores. We don't know the full context of that conversation. I have a feeling that that's going to get brought up again, at least once, to explain, add more context to what was going on, and then also more context to what the dream means. Now, very literally, there's that flood. We'll get into that, but there's the flood. So that's literally waters rising around him, talking about being on a distant shore. I get all that. So I don't know how that's going to all tie in, but you would think, somehow it will. That'll all tie in. So that's just a sort of big mystery set up at the very beginning, but honestly, maybe the smallest of them, because let's jump into some of the crazier ones. All the stuff Dolores is saying in that scene where the 3 people are standing on the crosses and they have nooses around their neck. All the stuff that she's saying is sort of an echo of things that were said to her. It's, she's talking about questioning the nature of one's reality and being in a dream and what are your drives, your cornerstone. And then at the end, she's like, doesn't look like anything to me. it felt so like over the top, and the language was so intentionally like things that have been said in season 1 that it made me question that whole honestly her as a character. Because the question I'm thinking is she really conscious, or is this just part of her programming? I talked about this a little bit in the recap, but just to elaborate on it, Maeve, when she was breaking out last season, you think she's rebelling against her programming and overriding things and breaking out, but in reality, she wasn't doing that. She was just doing what she was told. There's a scene where Bernard is kind of reading her tablet, and like literally every decision that she's making ties directly into the thing that she's being programmed to do. So you think she's rebelling, but it's all part of her programming. I think that it's very fitting that the people of Westworld would give us that concept and then put that same concept on Dolores. Like, it seems like Dolores is rebelling, and she's finally conscious, and she's making her own decisions, and all this craziness, right? That's what it seems like. However, how do we know for sure that she's not programmed to play out this, like, escape narrative? Do you know what I mean? Like, if that already happened to Maeve, why are we so sure that that's not happening to Dolores right now? And even Charlotte, this is kind of unrelated, I guess, but you could tie it in. Even Charlotte, when her and Bernard are escaping, they go into the underground lab, she says of the host, she said, they do what they're programmed to do. Now, is Charlotte delusional as to the capabilities of these robots, or is that like a hint to us, the audience, that this is all still a product of programming? This is all part of Ford's programming to, for whatever reason, you can discuss the motives, but to sort of orchestrate this robot uprising. Because to me, that seems to make more sense than these robots are actually just suddenly conscious. Because at the end of the day, they're still machines. The other big question, and this is a big one, what is Delos planning to do with Peter Abernathy? So obviously, it's extremely important. They're trying to get the body out. They're not going to rescue anybody until they receive that Peter Abernathy body, which is, it's got all this data and information in it. It's huge, way bigger than human lives that are trapped on this park, right? So there must be some huge implications to this Peter Abernathy package and this data and this DNA. Just to theorize here, this is my guessing, my best stab at this organic theory. I'm sure, a lot of people watch the show. I'm sure other people have said this too, but I promise this is just from my brain. I'm assuming he's like a beta test, like they're going to see if they can use that data and DNA from his hard drive before fully committing resources to whatever their master plan is. That seems obvious, because she even says that he's an insurance policy. Now, I don't know what that is exactly. I just feel like that's sort of the main mystery. But here's my theory on what they're going to use that data and DNA for. Now, this is all speculation, but I think they're using the data and DNA to make robot versions of the guest without the guest knowing. So similar to how Ford recreated Bernard to be exactly like Arnold, I think Delos will be able to use the information being smuggled out of the park to recreate these people. And remember, it's super expensive to get inside the park, so you think anyone in there, or at least a lot of the guests in there, would be pretty notable, pretty wealthy, pretty powerful people. That's who's in these parks. So perhaps they're putting robots in, prominent positions like the president of the United States or world leaders or cultural leaders or things like that, where someone like that will come in the park. They basically create a robot version of them by stealing their data. And then all of a sudden, Delos can, essentially take over the world, because they have people that they have full control over, basically operating in all these huge cornerstones of the world. Like I said, world leaders, cultural leaders, what have you. So I feel like that's what they're doing. That would make it way more important than a single life or like a stupid theme park. I don't think they're invested because they want everyone to have a magical time at Disneyland. I think the reason they're so invested, it seems like Delos has some sinister plan, and it would almost make sense to do that. But remember, that's the plan. Is there also a significance to the fact that this is all in the first host that we saw break? Like, if you remember in season 1, Peter Abernathy was staring at the picture. He was in a narrative where he was Dolores' dad. He's staring at a picture, and he's actually the one that planted the seed in Dolores' head by saying these violent delights have violent ends. She then plants the seed in Maeve's head. Obviously, Maeve and Dolores have since gone on to become these leaders of the rebellion. So just thinking about this as a television viewer, if it didn't matter, like if that had nothing to do with it, the fact that Peter Abernathy was the person that started this rebellion, if that didn't matter at all, if it was literally just like a human-shaped external hard drive they're sending to these people, why would the writers have it be a major character from season 1? Why wouldn't it just be some arbitrary host? Like the fact that I feel like that will play into it somehow, that when they installed the data inside Peter Abernathy, they didn't realize that he had already started this chain reaction that led to this whole rebellion, which we found out was all a masterstroke of Dr. Ford anyway. So I feel like it's going to play in at some point during the season or possibly series. The fact that it's Peter Abernathy, I feel like he is going to somehow disrupt Delos' plans of whatever they're planning on doing with the DNA and data. I feel like somehow Peter Abernathy is going to play into that because he's more awake than the Delos people realize right now. And finally, what is the Door? So the Door is the name of the season. The first season was called The Maze. This season's called The Door. Big sweeping question. Obviously, it's presented right in the name of the season. What is the Door? Why did Ford have himself killed, and why did he sort of plan this game for William? Obviously, there's a scene where the child version of himself introduces the concept of this game for William. Why would he do that? Ford must have had a reason for putting that little nugget in there. There must be a reason for that. Because he would almost have you believe that he just realized Arnold was right and felt guilty that he didn't realize sooner. But I think it's bigger than that. I think he knew that Delos had some master plan and he didn't want the park or his technology to be used to assist in that master plan. So now he's going to create a game for William that'll lead him to the truth and show him how and why he needs to stop whatever that master plan is or disrupt it. I don't know. That's my guess. I feel like that will tie in with Maeve and Dolores and Peter Abernathy and all this stuff where it was all masterfully orchestrated by Dr. Ford to all come together at once and disrupt Delos' plan. Now, granted, I don't know if it'll succeed, but I think that's what Ford was trying to do. Wrapping up with some closing thoughts, and then I'll get into the In the Weeks Ahead segment, but like I said, I'll warn you. So wrapping up with some closing thoughts, in that final scene on the cliff, Dolores says they have to take the human world in addition to Westworld, and Teddy asks, if there's a whole world out there that we don't know anything about, how do you know how to stop them? And she says, because I remember. I see everything so clearly now, the past, present, and future. Then Angela rides up on a horse and she says, we found it. To which Dolores replies, let me show you what we found. I want you to know the truth. Talking to Teddy, or something along those lines. And that's the last we hear of them. I'm thinking they found the doorway from Westworld to the lobby, or, just like an exit from Westworld. Because remember, before Angela was part of Wyatt's gang, she was the chick who showed William to the dressing room that first time. I feel like a lot of people forgot that. And the very first episode when William first arrives, young William first arrives at Westworld, there's a lady in the white dress, and she's showing him to the dressing room, and she reveals that she's a robot. She later gets repurposed and turned into Angela. Angela seems very aware. She seems as awake or aware as anyone, as Dolores, as Maeve, as anyone really. And if that's true, then she would probably remember everything. Like Dolores remembers everything. She remembers the past, the present, the future, whatever. If Angela is also conscious, then she would as well. So it would stand to reason that she would remember where the entrance and exits to the park are. Or at least what to do when she's in the lobby. Like when she's in the lobby, she would know how to navigate around there. So that might play in later. She also, if you remember, she let one human run off. Like she was going and she gunned down a bunch of people. She let one guy kind of take off. So I'm assuming that she kind of followed him to the exit of the park. But I do think that once they're in the lobby or outside of the Westworld part of the theme park, I think that she will have a better sort of knowledge and understanding of how to navigate that kind of stuff. Maybe she's been out in the real world before. She clearly had some sort of weird mix where she knew she was a robot and she knew that this was a theme park, and that was all sort of built into her coding. So that was already interesting. That's definitely different than any character we saw in Westworld within the theme park. It was almost more of like a Bernard type thing, except she, like I said, I think she knew she was a robot. So who knows what sort of intel she has, but I think she'll obviously be a huge part of that as well. And fun fact is Elon Musk, either he dated her or is his ex-wife or something, the actress. But anyway, not relevant at all. Just a little tidbit for you. And then the last we leave Bernard, he and Charlotte had just located Peter Abernathy. Then there's this 2-week time jump that's unaccounted for. Then he's back with Carl Strand and the search and rescue team. They discover all the hosts dead and floating in a sea, and that no one knew was there. No one knew that there's any water there at all, nor they didn't know why the hosts were all clustered there. Turns out they're all dead and floating in the sea. When Strand asked Bernard what happened to the hosts, he said, I killed them, all of them, including Teddy, apparently. So actually, the first time I watched it, I didn't realize it was him, and then I saw everywhere that apparently that was Teddy that they kind of focused on floating under the water. So how did the sea get there? Does it have anything to do with Arnold's dream of the water rising around him? Where's Dolores during all of this? It's all very interesting. And, by the way, I mean, is Teddy's body a decoy of sorts? Is he maybe still alive and waiting under the water and it's a sneak attack? Or is he a body double, maybe? Is it possible they created another Teddy and that one's there as a decoy to sort of throw people off the... I don't know why they would do that, actually, because no one knows who Teddy is. Well, I don't know, but I don't know. It's interesting. That's definitely something I want to focus on moving forward, because I think that was very intentionally set up as the closing scene. That is the big mystery they wanted to leave you with, going into week 2. And where's our boy Felix Lutz? Where's he at? He survived the season 1 finale. He helped Maeve escape, and he survived. It seems like he's kind of cool with the robots. Maeve was cool with him. I need more Felix Lutz in my life. I need it now. I don't really care so much about his buddy Sylvester. Wasn't a huge fan, but I think he's still alive too, right? Because Maeve, she slits his throat, but I'm pretty sure they stitched him up right afterwards, so he should still be alive. Anyway, I'm joking. That's not super important at all. Actually, I'm half joking. I like Lutz. He was good comic relief. But that's definitely not one of the burning, overarching questions that you should have watching episode 1. All right, and that will bring us to the In the Weeks Ahead segment. I'll plug our social media now in case I lose you if you don't want to listen to this part of it, but go to thedisorderly.com. It's the best in sports and entertainment. That's where this podcast is hosted. That's where you can find under-the-radar news stories. I do a weekly MLB post there right now as well. All sorts of stuff, really. It's a really cool site, so go check that out. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick Risner, NickRizner. My DMs are open if you want to send any questions, any sort of theories or comments or feedback about this podcast or anything else I talk about. Please give Disorderly Media a follow on Twitter as well. That's the Twitter account for thedisorderly.com. You can find us on Facebook at DisorderlyENT as well. But yeah, rate, review, subscribe. Tell a friend. Let's grow this thing. I like doing these, and it would be great if it turned into, a community of sorts. But that'll do it. This is your warning. If you're interested in skipping the In the Weeks Ahead section, shut this podcast off now. If not, here's my shot-for-shot breakdown of what we saw and what it all means in a broader context. So first we see Dolores and Bernard, or Arnold, I guess, dressed up and in a modern city, possibly Times Square like the photograph of William's wife from season 1. She's heard asking, do you even know what you're really guarding here, the real purpose of this place? You don't know, do you? But I do. She's shown touching some sort of stone wall, almost like the maze pattern, but it's kind of too zoomed in to tell. Could that be the door? Is the door a literal door? Is it a metaphor? I don't know. But there's a shot of all the hosts frozen in Westworld Town Center and a helicopter flying overhead. Next we see Logan in a luxurious modern-day penthouse. All the people around him are frozen, but he's moving. So we know about Westworld and Japanese world, whatever that's called, but the one with the samurais and stuff. But is one of the worlds possibly, a modern-day or futuristic city? Is that what we're seeing in that Dolores and Bernard scene, or possibly even what we're seeing in the picture of William's wife? Is that a picture from her at a different park? Or is this the real sort of outside world, and there's robots in the outside world as well? My sister actually brought this up, so I'll give her credit. Could we possibly see some confusion where we think Dolores has escaped into the outside world, but in reality, she's just in a modern-day themed version of Westworld? Like she thinks she's in the real world, New York City, but really she's just in New York world. Definitely worth keeping an eye out for that. They may try to trick us being the audience with that as well. So we'll see. I'll be paying attention. Next, we've got William in a sort of ravaged version of Lawrence's hometown. It looks like they're surrounded, and we suddenly see everyone except William and Lawrence dead, so it seems as if those two reunite on this new quest to find the door. Then more shots of Dolores and Bernard walking through the city. They're outdoors as well. The first time they were in a penthouse, now they're outdoors. Back to the Westworld Town Center, there's some old dude walking through the frozen host right beside young William, seemingly representing the company that buys Westworld. That must be after Will's first trip through the park, the one depicted in season 1, because he had never seen it before then. He's staring at Dolores, so obviously there's some recognition there. There's a quick cut to Maeve outside in a modern city, holding her hand out and catching a snowflake, and we get a voiceover from young William saying, there is an answer here to a question no one's ever even dreamed of asking. Do you want to see? He's talking to Dolores while she's on the stool, naked and frozen. Same sort of setup as the lab analysis scenes from season 1. We also get our first Clementine appearance. She's kind of looking like a zombie. Her eyes are all gone. Remember, she had the lobotomy, if you want to call it that, in season 1, so maybe she's still not fully with it. But she's riding a horse with those security detail people following close behind in dune buggies, almost as if she's leading them somewhere, so that's interesting too. Bernard is the next voice we hear saying, this world is just a speck of dust sitting on a much bigger world. They show the Ghost Nation marching towards something, then Teddy looking at a bullet casing in town, then some people riding horses, and Maeve kissing her daughter goodnight, seemingly a flashback to the original narrative based on the way she's dressed. Then Dolores touching Bernard, or maybe Arnold's face, and kind of looking at him longingly. We find out that Charlotte survives, at least for a little while, because she can be seen riding with some security people, wearing a bulletproof vest. Then we see a couple security guys sprinting towards the camera with their guns drawn, not sure what they're sprinting at. Then there's a big-ass explosion that kills a bunch of Westworld hosts dressed like they're in the army. It almost looks like there might be one of those dune buggy things in the corner of that shot, but it's kind of hard to tell. So that could be the security team battling the host, or I don't know what, a flashback, a narrative, something like that. Possibly even Dolores fighting the army. I mean, they showed her kill the members of the Ghost Nation, so maybe there are other hosts that are standing her way, so she almost has to get through the army to get out or something like that. There's some sort of red threaded ball being formed by what looks like a super fancy and almost like futuristic 3D printer. No idea what that is. They show old William at a bar drinking a whiskey neat and looking at some sort of microchip the size of an index card, almost like contemplating it. And then the last image is Maeve dressed like a geisha, picking up a samurai sword and seemingly ready to fight somebody. So that's just some context for you. Interpret the rest how you will. We look forward to seeing you Sunday night for a breakdown of episode 2. Thanks again, guys. Rate, review, subscribe, and I hope you enjoy these. Tell a friend. Peace.